hosted by Delhi and NCR chapter. Today's session is about compassionate leadership and humanizing workplace. What else could we have seen since morning? All the challenges that we went through, and yet we are all up here listening to our speakers. And I'm sure you are all enjoying our great speakers, giving you some, fine takeaways to carry home back. My name is Leela Andrea Chaudhary, and I'm so excited to invite our speaker, Miss Linda McLaughlin. She's the ICF Global Board Director at International Coaching Federation. She's a master certified and an award winning coach, and also the founder of Leadership Works. Linda is an expert in executive and leadership development and has worked across Europe, Middle East, Africa, USA, and South America. She's a co author of two books on leadership and change. She is here to talk to all of us about empathy in authentic leadership. We would love to hear from you, so please write your questions and thoughts and views at the chat box during the session. We will pick them up at the end of the session. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Linda.
Very much for your invitation to speak at this wonderful conference. And I'm delighted to be representing the International Coaching Federation, which, as you know, is the leading global body advancing and regulating the coaching profession. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the ICF. And just to let you know that currently, as of this month, we have over 42,000 members, 42,000 professional coaches right around the globe. And I'm delighted to say that 1,000 of those are credentialed coaches here in India. Can I have the next slide? Next one, please. I see somebody asking a question, and I'm very happy to share these slides with the organizers, and they will share them on. That's just an example of our structure, and maybe go to the next slide, please, Lila. And just so that you know, I am a master coach myself. I'm a coach trainer and mentor coach. I have over 20 years experience in consulting, organization development, and leadership development. And I'm very honored to serve on the Global ICF board. And I've been elected by our members to represent their voice. And as you can see from the photos there, we are a truly international board representing our members right around the globe. Next slide, please. Here in India, we have 6 amazing chapters, Delhi NCR being one of our foremost chapters in India, and they're all led by volunteers like myself. If I can have the next slide. And they are part of our network of 140 chapters in 80 different countries. And I do invite you to connect with your local ICF chapter for more information about coaching and the world of coaching and the impact coaching can have in your organizations. Next slide, please. So, with that introduction to ICF, I want to get into this very, very topical subject, compassionate leadership, humanizing workplaces. And if I may, I'd like to begin with a story. And back in 2019, I had the pleasure of being at a conference around neuro leadership practices in organizations. And I heard the HR director of the Patagonia Corp speak at a conference. And that was when conferences were face to face. Remember those days? Now, I was really taken and inspired by their approach to people. And I've been following them online ever since. I've become a bit of a stalker because for me, they represent what humanizing can be. And remember, they are a commercial company. And yet they combine that profit-making aspect of their business with being very value driven and having policies around activism, which actually is about compassion for the planet and compassion and caring for their people. Next slide, please. And just an example, if you went onto their website, you will see a most inspiring and moving letter that their management team have written to show acknowledgement of the lack of diversity on our planet. The Black Lives Matter is one of those movements. And, you know, they've shown in that written apology that you can see there such humanity, such humility, and such regret. And within that, they also say that they're going to do more. And this is really at the heart of compassionate leadership. It's feeling the pain and suffering of others and being willing to go the extra mile, being willing to do something. So if I can have the next slide, please, Lila. So if we think about how they humanize their workplace, I think this is very interesting. If you visit their HQ on the West Coast of America, as you enter reception, you're likely to hear the sound of voices, children's voices. They have excellent
I think
daycare.
she is moderating one more session. So Shivasri is the host, right? Okay.
Sorry, is there a problem?
No, it's sorted, Linda. Please continue.
Okay, so you will hear the sound of children's voices. They have their creche right next door to reception. You know, you'll see wet towels hanging around on the staircases after people have been out for their surfing over lunchtime. So it's not like they separate the employees' professional life from their actual life as people. They're very much into hiring and attracting people who have activism in their DNA. And, you know, they allow staff time off to pursue their activism pursuits because they see that as building their brand as well. And they want to attract passionate people. Just recently for the US elections, they gave their people 4 days off to volunteer as poll workers. Some other things that they have done is they've introduced a 9-day working schedule. People still do the same amount of hours, but over a 9-day period, which gives, of course, workers a lot of 3-day weekends. Now, what was interesting to me was how they decided to evaluate that initiative. Was this working for all the needs of the stakeholders? And they didn't just look at performance and were KPIs met, but they built into that questionnaire questions about the employees' mental health, the employees' eating habits. By virtue of having extra time off, were they able to do better shopping, make better food choices? They were also asking about the quality of their employees' relationships with their families. Was that seen as a direct correlation? I think that's a really interesting way of where this compassion and humanizing their workforce is actually built into the DNA. They have just launched a new division called Patagonia Provisions, which is food. So as well as selling their famous outdoor apparel, which is what put them on the market in the first place, they're now actually very much into sustainable foods. And not only that, but they work with their producers and farmers to see how they can do regenerative farming, not just take from the land. And I just love that key guiding principle they have is what can we put back into our people? And ask yourselves, how many companies truly have that as their mantra? What can we put back into our people? Next slide, please. So let's just come to this word compassion. And you know, there's other words, synonyms that come to mind like sympathy and empathy. And what is the same and what is different about those words? Well, what we know is that sympathy is more like pity. Sympathy puts the sympathy giver in a one-up position. It can create victimhood and it actually separates us from the other. Empathy, as we know, allows us to take the perspective of others and recognize their emotions, which is useful. But compassion builds on empathy and goes much deeper and much further, because with compassion, it combines not just the understanding of the other, but the intention to do something about it. So with compassion, action is built in. So this is the question for us as leaders move into compassion. It means they have to be actively supporting their employees. Thank you so much. And actually, in the chat function, feel free to share your definition of compassionate leadership. It might be interesting for the audience to share that. And if I could have the next slide, please, Lila. Thank you so much. And I think that brings us into the pandemic that is probably the undercurrent to the conference. And when we think of the pandemic, it is for leaders and staff a unique time in history because for the first time, irrespective of role or position in a company, we are all sharing the same concerns, fears, and anxiety. We are all vulnerable to the pandemic. Title will not protect us. And it's an interesting thing that maybe shared emotion around what's going on really invites us as leaders to connect with our own humanity. And of course, the move to remote working and teleworking has also, perhaps for the first time, given us a glimpse into our employees' lives. And even as leaders, as HR professionals, we have to show, us and ourselves as humans, where we live, what our homes are like. We get glimpses of people's families. We hear their children in the background. We hear their spouses telling them their dinner is ready. There's so much that, in a way, the upside of that pandemic has given us more a shared sense of humanity and a glimpse of who we are as humans, that we are humans as well as employees. If I can have the next slide, please, Lila. So the World Economic Forum is very much on the money with this, and they have put as part of the main agenda for Davos in 2021, mental well-being of employees. So it really is a hot topic out there now for industry, for business, for economies. And here are the latest statistics of people who say from the World Economic Forum that actually they have experienced more of these negative feelings in the past year. And I mean, we only have to think of what is the human cost of that, but also what is the business cost of that. And again, I might invite you who are listening in the audience, what have you noticed in your workplace? What changes in well-being have you noticed at the coalface? So do share that in the chat function. If I could have the next slide, please. And here I want to share with you the SCARF model. Some of you will be familiar with this. This has been developed by Dr. David Rock of the Neuro Leadership Institute. And it's a fascinating and simple model because it's combining what we know from the neurosciences with what we know from leadership. And I use this model a lot in my work with senior executives and C-suite teams. I'm a very active coach. And the model is based on the fact that the human brain is hardwired. We're hardwired to scan everything that happens as a threat or reward and in every situation. So when we come into work, that scanning mechanism in the brain is very much alive and well. We don't switch it off at the door to the office. And as HR professionals and leaders, we want to create conditions where people are moving towards. So what we know in this model is when those 5 elements that you see, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, when they are in place for employees, they move towards. In other words, they're more motivated, they're more engaged, they're more productive. When there is an absence of those 5 critical dimensions, they move away, they disengage, they underperform. So if we think about it, if we look at the status one, how are we acknowledging our people and their contributions? People need this more than we can imagine. In terms of certainty, yes, these are very uncertain times, and we have to help people live with a lot of the ambiguity. But how do we create some level of stability in the midst of this great uncertainty? What can we tell people won't change? What assurance can we give, no matter how small? In relation to autonomy, the greatest switch off is micromanaging. So how are we making sure that we as leaders are not micromanaging, that we are encouraging our leadership team to show trust? We really have to learn how to manage people remotely. I'm sure this is a topic coming up in other sessions. The issue of relatedness, where the human brain is wired to want to be part of a tribe, to connect with people. Now, this is being compromised hugely with the move to remote working. We want that sense of belonging. We want this sense of kinship. And what are we doing as HR professionals right now to create that? Even at a time when there is a lot of online fatigue, what are we doing? And finally, that issue of fairness. And remember, when people are stressed, any hint of unfairness is really going to stress them hugely. So we have to demonstrate above and beyond what we might have done in the past, our impartiality. So this is the challenge right now for organizations. How are we recreating our workplaces, our work policies, and our leadership practices to ensure that we are delivering SCARF, and SCARF in a way that is moving people towards our mission, towards the value we want to create. Can I get another slide, please? And here is what a couple of major corporations are doing right now, what they're thinking about this topic of compassionate leadership and humanizing the workplace. And, you know, Bank of America, I can vouch for them. My daughter is a director with Bank of America in London. And so I know they walk the talk of what they're saying. And, you know, it's very clear here that they have told their leaders, you've got to lead from the top. You've got to be able to show vulnerability. You've got to be able to talk about your own mental health challenges right at the moment, and so that gives permission to other people to be vulnerable. So it starts with leadership. Think about what messages have you sent out to your leadership team. If I can have the next slide, BP. In terms of BP, what are they doing? I mean, again, we used to often have a privacy concern that we would not want to ask employees questions of a personal nature or discuss their mental health at work. It was kind of seen as a no-go area. Now what you can see is that the major corporations are, you know, opening up those conversations, and they're tracking it. Absolutely tracking it, and that they can build that mental well-being into the leadership culture, which will mean making mindfulness practices mainstream, for instance, that will encourage leaders to be compassionate in how they're dealing with the human staff issues they're coming across. Next slide, please. Sorry, let me just close something here that's on my top. Again, I think agility, that company, very well known in the tech area. And what I thought was interesting about their approach is that they're not just targeting the employee, but rather the network, the people around that employee, their support team, because they probably realize that we have to look at this in a systemic way. Thank you. And the next slide. Now, WePro, interesting, and of course, this is top of their HR. This organization is a fellow Indian, and I believe he writes for the NHRDN journal. And I think he's some very interesting things to say about the WePro approach. And again, I think companies, tech companies in particular, there is a war for talent. And this is where he says compassion and empathy are no longer seen as extra nice to have. Wonderful. And, you know, really how we need to get leaders to engage with people in a more developmental way. And that brings me in part to coaching, because coaching is a wonderful tool for leaders to be in that space of growth mindset and support with their staff. Next one, please. So maybe just bringing it back to you, you can see that compassionate leadership is on the top agendas of many of the big companies, that, you know, the 100. Ask yourself these questions. What are you doing at your level? What are you doing within HR in your company? Or if you're a divisional or departmental leader, what are you doing there that actually kind of creates a culture? Not just are you checking in on your own behaviors, how often you check in with staff, either individually or in small groups, but how are you setting the tone? Are you giving permission for colleagues to check in on each other, for peer check-ins? Are you normalizing that? Are you encouraging that? And how do you do it? And again, what I'd ask you now in the chat function is, I'm sure many of you are introducing new policies around well-being. Would be wonderful if you can share those again with colleagues, because I think the beauty of these conferences is where we can learn and share from each other. Next one, please. So a recent HBR article, which you can see the title there, has this concept of wise compassion. Because maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, compassion is all well and good, but you know, we have to satisfy the shareholders. We have to turn a profit to pay the workforce. And I love this concept of wise compassion, because here we are bringing that humanity into our interactions, but at the same time, we're keeping an eye on, you know, the KPIs, we're keeping an eye on strategy, and we are often, I love how they say what it is. It's kind of doing the hard stuff with the human heart. And that is wise compassion. And that is a super article if you want to check that out. Next one, please. So some ideas, how are you going to grow wise compassion for yourself or for your leadership team? And of course, the first thing, which we know, is to give and offer compassion. We have to be compassionate towards ourselves. So we all know we're high performers, many of us in this arena. We know how hard we are. We know about those inner voices that are always telling us we're not doing enough, we need to do more, keep going, push through, don't acknowledge how you're feeling. So being kind to yourself is a great first step, because only then can we be really and truly non-judgmental and kind to others. You know, check your intention. So before you go into any meeting, before you have a conversation with anybody, say, now, what am I trying to get out of this? What is my intention here? Is it to be one up? Is it to use my power? Is it to push through a decision? Or am I here truly to hear what they have to say and co-create an option with them? So check your intention. Again, mindfulness has become mainstream. I mean, I have been working in corporates for over 40 years, and I've been quite into a spiritual path as well over that time. I never imagined that mindfulness and other spiritual practices would become so mainstream. It may be slightly different in India because of your wonderful traditions, but certainly in Western style companies, this mindfulness, because it's only then that we're present. We're present to ourselves, we're present to other people. We can understand where other people are. We can hear only when we're present. And finally, I would say coaching is a wonderful tool and a wonderful route into compassion. So in terms of being self-compassionate, you can hire a coach for yourself, because often as HR professionals, as leaders in organizations, it's incredibly lonely. Who can you truly confide in? Who can you trust? A coach is there as a thinking partner for you, a trusted, ultra confidential partner for you. So that's one step. You could also engage a coach to work with your management team. How are we responding to the pandemic? How do we build our own connection so that we can support each other and then in turn support our workforce? So team coaches are very, very able to help you do that and be that kind of objective outsider to your system. Next one, please.
Sorry for interrupting, Linda. Shiva, can you please put the presentation on full display because there are such interesting, fascinating information. We are not able to see it properly.
Yes, I have. Can you do that?
Yeah. In any case, we also now need to have the others join the conversation. So if it's okay, we should start because we are running behind schedule for the other speakers.
Okay, I had lots more to say. My apologies, but I hope that you have a flavor of where I'm coming from and the role of coaching in building compassionate leadership. And know that ICF coaches are here in India and we can work with you. Reach out to your chapters and begin to think about how you create this compassion muscle. We're here to partner with you. So thank you so much, and I look forward to having the discussion with my colleagues on the panel.
Thank you, Linda, for the informative session you have given us. And personally, I've learned a lot, and I am my apologies as well for all the technical glitches we were experiencing, and which only goes up to show how we actually become more humanized in our workplaces. So thank you once again. I would hand over this conversation ahead with our panel discussion, which is going to be talking more about the humanizing side of our workplaces. May I invite Mr. Rajiv Dubey, Principal Advisor, Mahindra & Mahindra, Mr. Srini Vedumula, Chief People Officer, Bharat Financial Inclusion, Mr. Sudhish Venkatesh, Chief People Officer, Azim Premji Foundation, and our session anchor, Mr. Anil Sachdev, Founder, Chairman of School of Inspired Leadership. Over to you, Anil, sir.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say that in this session, I want to begin by first offering to millions of fellow Indians in this country my sincerest apologies. You know, I don't know about you, but when the COVID crisis began and I saw all around me and the sights of people taking to the streets and people literally walking thousands of miles back to their village because they didn't have food, they didn't have roof over their head. And I was asking myself, what kind of country have we created for ourselves? What kind of accountability are our businesses taking for the way we live now? And it was extremely painful for a lot of us to see our fellow Indians without food, without money, without water, literally left on the streets because all of a sudden we in businesses decided to shut our doors because of the lockdown. And we didn't know, the suddenness was such that we did not know how to respond. I think this should never be allowed to happen in the civilized world of today. And I therefore want to offer apologies to the millions of fellow Indians who suffered this and millions of people all over the world who suffered. On behalf of all the businesses, I want to say, please forgive us. This should never happen in the civilized world. The second thing I want to say is that the biggest accountability we have is to understand that in this word compassion, we are all connected. Many years back, Peter Russell did this research to show the pictures of Mother Earth taken from outer space. Some of the cities resembled cancerous cells. And the book called The Global Brain. And do you know why that was the case? Because the cities which had the highest crime rate, the highest violence, the highest lack of compassion, if I could call it by that, they actually resembled cancerous cells. In our framework of compassion, I want to offer to you that our first compassion action is to be in the service of Mother Earth. The mother needs us. The plants and animals and species, they need us. She is the most important stakeholder. Within Mother Earth, then, the entire community of living beings is therefore our next most important stakeholder. Living in all those communities are customers who invest in our products and services, and all the citizens who are citizen customers who use the services of governments. And therefore, they are the most important stakeholder in the third case. And the triology of shareholder, employee, and supplier are all together serving the needs of the customer and customer citizens in the community, which in turn is part of Mother Earth. We need to understand the very purpose of business is to serve the well-being of all. When business forgets this, when capitalism forgets this, then capitalism becomes absolutely hollow. For the last few weeks, I and my colleagues in Shizuoka University in Japan, whose global board I serve on, and the ISE Business School in Europe, which also we are associated with, have launched a course called The Future of Capitalism, in which MBAs from all over the world are coming together to have a dialogue on what kind of world are we co-creating for the future. I think the word compassion comes from first, let's get out of our own shoes. When we get out of our own shoes, only then we can step into somebody else's shoes. Only then we feel empathy. And when we begin to feel that sense of empathy, we want to do something about it. Because after feeling empathy, if we don't act, even our future generation will not forgive us. And so we need to honor that life-giving force within us that is calling out to us to say, this is the time for us to act. This is the time for us to serve. And this is the time for us to serve the well-being of all. I'm extremely pleased to invite Sudhish Venkatesh, who perhaps represents the best in business in the country. Wipro, whose chairman, I had the good fortune of working with him for many years in the earlier years as his partner and consultant. And the Azim Premji Foundation, which is an absolute role model in this respect of what I just spoke. So, Sudhish, it's my privilege to invite you to make your opening comments on how you are serving the well-being of all and what you're doing about that. Thank you, Sudhish. Sudhish, you may want to unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Anil, thank you. Very positive introduction to Wipro and the Azim Premji Foundation. As well as Linda, you also referred to Wipro, so thank you very much. Let me just confirm that I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
So, let me start with what you asked me, Anil. By the nature of work that we do in the foundation, we come in close touch with communities. These could be the teachers, the students in all the districts that we work in, and their families. These could be partner organizations whom we fund, through which we touch communities. So the nature of work brings us in close touch with these communities. And what we have learned is during the last 10, 12 months, clearly, this has exposed the fault lines in society. The inequalities have sharpened, and it has become more visible. So people who sort of may not have been aware of this, and some may have even lived in denial, have now realized that no one is safe till everyone is safe. So my first observation is that inequalities have sharpened and fault lines have got exposed. The second is I think we have further realized that we are only trustees of wealth. We come into wealth for a variety of reasons, sometimes deserved, sometimes undeserved as well. But our responsibility, like Gandhi said, and it has come into even sharper relief now, is that we should see ourselves as the trustees of wealth and not beyond that. The third is, communities have the answers if only we care to listen to them, right? It's not as if we can walk into a community and create and recommend solutions from the outside. Actually, the solutions are there right within. They have the answers if we only care to listen to them. And when I say communities, these are people who work around our factories in the context of Wipro. These are families of our employees. These are the many thousands of suppliers who are not directly part of our organization, but part of our larger community. So in essence, what I'm trying to communicate is these are some of the things on that specific stakeholder called community that we have realized through this. And as a responsible organization, we have to take leadership on matters like sustainability, wealth distribution, and so on and so forth. Back to you, Anil.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sudesh, with that. And with this, may I now turn to Srini. Srini, you have done some amazing work inside your own workplace, and you have a frame of looking at this from how to create a whole culture of inclusiveness and diversity in the way you create and manifest compassion. So would you share your thoughts on this subject, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Anil, and thank you, NHRD and Linda. That was a wonderful keynote setting. Thank you for that. And I wish to thank Rajiv and Sudesh. And I will now focus on about what do we do as an organization, right? I kind of borrow one specific statement, which is about it's nothing but all of us are working towards a whole person engagement now, rather than just looking at an individual who come and provide certain amount of output. So we as an organization, we believe in a whole person engagement, which goes beyond how we engage in at workplace. And we are trying to make a journey in terms of going beyond employee satisfaction, and we are trying to define a journey called happiness at workplace. We believe happy employees, are more involved, and they take a lot more ownership for the business. For the people who are in the audience, I just want to let you know we are a microfinance institution. We're part of an IndusInd bank. We have 25,000 people, feet on street. We operate in 21 states across the country. We are the largest private organization who touch the largest number of villages on a weekly basis. Our team travels to 130,000 villages every week and meets roughly around 8 million customers, and all our customers are women. And that's the backdrop under which I'm talking about. So I'll just dive into we as an organization, because we have a fairly large workforce and they come from different walks of life. We kind of believe that the only way we'll be able to get a consistent experience to our stakeholders, whether it is employees, customers, predominantly we have two large stakeholders, which is employees and customers. We are not listed firm anymore, so we don't have direct investors, but certainly the larger society and government are stakeholders. We as an organization believe that rituals are significantly important in driving compassion and empathy, right? While we all talk about it, we believe that rituals are significantly important. So I'll briefly talk about some of the rituals we follow and some of the things which become part of our framework in terms of driving compassion. When we talk about compassion with employees, we make sure that everything in the organization is an inverted pyramid. Our frontline employees are key stakeholders of our organization. Everything in the organization measures around our frontline employees. Because compassion has to be beyond words, we as an organization believe that we also have to cater to the aspirations. If I have to look at one of the slides Linda has talked about, where does a person start, right? In that, where do I go from here on? So what kind of a growth prospects? We know for a fact, we take typically the people whom we take at the front line are typically a 10th pass or a 12th fail. They're not really highly literate from that perspective. So we made sure that we cater to their aspirations. The first 5 layers of our organization are reserved for the people who start from the bottom, so that we do groom them and they can work with us and actually aspire to be. That's the compassion we show. In our organization, in the frontline staff, everybody is called sir, and that's a mandatory thing. That's a way of giving them respect. In terms of how do we instill compassion or make sure that our leaders practice compassion, we ask, while there are rituals available, we ask people to go beyond rituals. We encourage and train our leaders to accept vulnerability as a positive trait. We want to make sure that vulnerability is fine. You welcome differences, you welcome different thoughts and people challenging things. And we encourage leaders and managers to accept vulnerability as a positive trait. Cultural fit is significantly important in terms of what kind of a culture. So our screening mechanism, we hire all our leaders, make sure that they can be part of our culture. So we make sure that they go to a field visit, they spend a couple of days with our field, they live in our branches. That kind of helps us, weed out people who may not culturally fit us. So we make sure that, we bring in people who are culturally aligned to our organization. We have a score in our organization. Every people manager is assessed based on compassion, and there's a score given that has a 50% weightage in terms of his leadership capability. And of course, we have other hard metrics like attrition, diversity and inclusion and equity. We train and certify all our managers on emotional intelligence. Another thing, compassion is a cultural ingredient. I talked about, an employee engagement survey. Beyond that, we ask all our employees to volunteer X amount of hours, because we also believe that as a part of integral part of the society, people have to be compassionate with where we live and from where we kind of do business with. So everybody mandatorily need to give in 8 hours of volunteering hours, and that helps us actually being oneness with the world. And we have a mandatory role rotation. Everybody in the organization has to go and work in the front line for a week in a year. That makes sure that people understand the difficulties which our frontline staff goes. That is part of a compassion we drive in terms of the frontline organizations. Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. And Srini, what you said just now, in our schools, which we run the MBA programs in 2 campuses, the entire focus is mindfulness as the core pillar, supported with compassion. Every year we take our students to Dharamshala, and sometimes they have the good fortune to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which Rajiv Dubeji has come with me. Rajiv is a fellow traveler. We have gone several times there. And you know what the Dalai Lama says? He says, compassion is the key to mindfulness. And so, the whole practice of mindfulness and compassion are so interlinked. And these are the 2 keys of becoming leaders of the kind that the world so much requires. And I'm so pleased that Rajiv is going next. Rajiv and I went to Kailash Mountain together. And in that entire adventure, reaching 19,700 feet, I saw in Rajiv how this practice manifested. While everyone else was getting anxious because we had some near-death experiences, I could see that Rajiv was very focused in the present. And Rajiv, that was a great testimony of sourcing the qualities that you talk about, which has for you has become a lifelong journey. So with these words, I will like Rajiv to please share his wonderful work, lifelong work in this area. Go ahead, Rajiv.
Oh, thank you so much, Anilji. I merely want to build upon the excellent expositions and articulation that Linda, Anil, Sudesh, and Srini have made. I want to say that not only from a philosophical and moral point of view is it really important to be closely connected with all stakeholders, but even from a pure business point of view, if you want to have sustained and sustainable outperformance, there is no getting away from having compassion. And let me quickly build that case, and which is really, the work that Anilji is talking about. So, and I'll draw upon Mahindra and I'll make it brief. For us, our core purpose is to drive positive change in the lives of our stakeholders and communities to enable them to rise. Now, we will do that through outperforming businesses. To have outperforming businesses in the new normal, one, we need to understand very closely what are the needs and the problems of our stakeholders, starting with the customer, but embracing other stakeholders, employees, supply chain, governments, and our shareholders. Now, this requires distributed leadership and the ability to take risk, to fail, and compassion and trust are core to creating distributed leadership, creating this deep understanding of the problems of our stakeholders, to be able to take risks, and above all, to unleash the full potential of not only our employees, but the entire ecosystem. So I would like to say that compassion, mindfulness, trust, these are powerful business imperatives. And if an organization doesn't show that, if an organization doesn't show through its strategy, structure, processes, and metrics, extreme care for all stakeholders and the core values of the group, the business cannot have sustained performance. So I'd like to stop there. I could go on and on, but I just wanted to say that that's not only philosophically and morally the right thing to do, it's in fact a business imperative, even if the organization does not explicitly care to show these things, but simply to do well, they have to do it. That's the point I wanted to make. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say that the day any one of you is feeling low, when you ask yourself, why has this happened to me? You and I have lost some really close, near and dear ones. And some of those moments we feel really low. And here is a little secret for you. The day you feel low and your resilience is going down, do a small act of kindness and compassion. You will not only make the world a little bit better for yourself, but you will feel stronger as a person. The more we practice loving kindness and compassion, the more we rise in our own eyes. And this is such a wonderful quality to inculcate for our own benefit. And as I was imagining going through Linda's LinkedIn profile, Dublin and Ireland and tourism, and from there going off into these adventures, American University, career services. I was just reliving her journey through her resume. I was saying, what an interesting thing, including Kennedy School and so on. And now, of course, being a certified coach. And I was asking myself, what is the reason why Linda chose this path? And somewhere I said, it must be for the love of the larger whole, where nature and human beings come together, so all kinds of interesting things, because it's fascinating how we come together when we sort of, bring this together. So with these words, may I request every one of you to ask questions to Linda, to Sudesh, to Srini, to Rajiv. And, this is a good time for us to ask questions to them.
Anil sir, there's an interesting question already there waiting for all of you.
Yes.
Can I go ahead with that?
Please.
Okay, so it's a question from Sarfaraz who says, how does compassionate leaders strike a balance between profits and people?
Good question. Who amongst you would like to answer? Rajiv, why don't you go first? Yes.
Yeah. So in fact, that was the theme that, you cannot have really good profit unless you're compassionate, because the starting point of a good profitable business is having a keen understanding of the question, what problem are we solving for our consumers? And once you cannot do that unless you have compassion, unless you have the ability to put yourself into the shoes of the consumer. Then once I know what problem I want to solve, how do you unleash the full potential of your employees, of your supply chain? That requires compassion also. It requires trust. It requires psychological safety. So the two, far from being in conflict, actually are complementary. You cannot have profitability on a sustained basis unless you have compassion and compassionate leadership. Not only that, compassion built, as I said, into the strategy, structure, processes, and metrics, and most of all into the behavior, everyday behavior, as we go around taking business decisions. This is my experience. This is my belief. I don't know how many people would agree with that.
Just back to what Rajiv said, right? So compassion actually also starts from how you design your products for your customers, right? It starts from there in terms of understanding your customer and being compassionate. We deal with a lot of illiterate or not so educated women. So we make sure that our products are so simple for them to understand so that we are able to have a very fair and transparent way. So it starts from there in terms of how you live in the society, how you interact with your customers, and profits are secondary. I think it's automatic fallout of it. And large organizations built on compassion, whether it's to do with Mahindras or Tatas or Birlas or any of these large organizations which have stood the test of times, they all have been extremely compassionate, both inside and outside, and that's how they have seen hundreds of years of existence. There are other organizations which came in, but you don't see them anymore. So that's, I think, talks about institution building.
Wonderful. Yeah, Sudesh.
So if I may just add to what was said, I fully agree with Rajiv that, profit and compassion are not actually a contradiction. And to build enduring organizations, like Srini was saying, one has to focus on the triple bottom line of people, profit, and the planet. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, Leela, what is the next question for us?
There's another interesting question, and it says that, is compassion inbuilt or can it be developed? Is it a very slow process? And I would be very curious if Linda could also support us with her experience while she has been coaching a whole lot of these professionals.
Go ahead, Linda.
Hopefully you can hear me, and that is a wonderful question. We are all born with mirror neurons. So the new baby in the world knows how to empathize because we are intrinsically social beings as humans. So we have it. Every human being is programmed with that. Perhaps somewhere along the line, they've forgotten to connect with it. But I truly believe that as we offer compassion to others, as we begin to love ourselves more, as we begin to practice mindfulness that all our other panelists have mentioned, that reconnects us with our essence. And in that essence is compassion and empathy. We just have lost connection for a short time. It's always there. And a great coach actually can hold you in that place of psychological safety where you can rediscover that in yourself.
Let me give you two practical examples. Many years back, the Boeing company was having issues that its 777 program was behind schedule. They found that there were lots of issues between different departments like engineering and manufacturing and project management and quality. Here is the experiment they did, led by Gary Jusela, who was the head of leadership development, close friend Gary. They started taking their senior leaders to do volunteering work with the black neighborhood districts in Seattle. On weekends, the leaders would go and serve. This brought the leadership team together. It improved the level of trust and it made the program hugely successful. In the School of Inspired Leadership, the biggest credit and the longest course, 1 day in a week, students work with not-for-profit organizations, NGOs, on social innovation. Sometimes some people get confused. We have come here to do MBA. Why are you asking us to go and work in slums? I said, this is because if you want to be a great business leader, you have to first learn to be compassionate. It can be built. We have these nerds, the techies who come into the school, who are very left brain, analytical thinking, who are not in touch with their emotions. But just like Linda said, at heart, all of us are compassionate. But through years of lying and ignoring that, we have sometimes undervalued that part of ourselves. When we encourage it to come out, it can surely be developed. It's a taught behavior to be compassionate. Would anyone else in the panel like to add to that?
I agree. I totally agree with what you're saying. It's not easy. I think one has to persist, but one must do it and persist with it. That's the only caveat I wanted to add. But I have seen in my own life so many amazing changes taking place in people because they have connected with themselves and they have connected with others. So I love what you said, Anilji, about we are all connected, or we are all, I think Linda also said that, we are all connected. Planet, people, profit, everything is interconnected.
Thank you.
Okay, so since we are all talking about mindfulness and I'm mindful of the time, so just to end this session, if you all can give maybe 2 tips that people can carry forward from here to become this compassionate leadership, what shall that be?
Yeah, let's start with Linda.
2 tips. I think
Yes.
the first is connect with yourself. It always starts with you. And connect and forgive yourself, find compassion for yourself. And I think then find moments every day where you show gratitude, or you can reach out to somebody and do a random act of kindness. Start small there and build the muscle. So kindness to yourself, kindness to someone else on a daily basis. Very, very small.
Thank you. Over to you, Sudesh. Your 2 tips, Sudesh.
Right. So the first one I would say is every little helps. Small acts of compassion add up to something much bigger. So don't wait for that big, large thing that you wish to do. Every little helps. So that's my first tip. And the second, which I'm actually borrowing from what you told me once, Anil, and I'm connecting it to Gandhi's work in education, which is called the Nai Talim, where he said good education needs to be of the head, the heart, and the hands. And you told me, Anil, that compassion is about the head converting into things into action through the heart. So let's remember that our education also has to therefore emphasize the head, the heart, and the hands. Back to you.
Thank you. Srini.
Yeah, thank you, Anil. And I will say 2 things. One is compassion is the fundamental bedrock of a leader to make his or her team inclusive and get the best out of the thing. So people have to make sure that they practice it. The managers or leaders who find it difficult, it doesn't come naturally to them, at least borrow certain rituals from others and make sure that you follow the rituals so that when people see your actions or things, they feel more, I'll say, comfortable to be able to have a conversation with you and be compassionate. That's it.
Wonderful. Rajiv ji.
Yes. So number one, please always remember 3 words: Satya, that is truth; Prem, that is compassion; and Seva, that is service. That's number one. Number two, remember always, I can make a difference. Today, now, I am the creator and not the victim. These are the 2 messages.
Wonderful. And I just want to end by narrating a little story. When I was a young, small boy, I saw 2 things happen to me. India lost the war to China, and the dead bodies of the soldiers were coming back wrapped up in the tricolor. And I saw middle class family women who did not have enough in their own homes taking off all their jewelry and donating for the widows. I have never seen such a thing in my life that I saw as a small boy. As I grew older, I noticed my father used to earn as an army officer 500 rupees, and he used to take out 50 rupees every month to feed the families of those who were less privileged. My mother would sometimes say my sister does not have a shirt because she has to go for a picnic to the Miranda house where she was studying. My father said, even though we have 6 children, we have enough to give them at least 1 dress. What about those who don't even have 1 dress? This goes first to that. And I remember when we formed our first company, Grow Talent Company, in our first board meeting, we passed our first board resolution that 10% of our gross profit will go to serve the poorest of the poor. For the last 21 years, that is something that we do. You see, as a parent, if we can create the right example for our children, as teachers, if we can create the right example in giving and sharing, when people grow older and they become responsible to create something, they will make compassion the center stone. So I would say, create, share, appreciate. Thank you. And I want to thank Linda for your wonderful, generous presence today, for your very kind energy. I want to thank Sudesh for your amazing, balanced and mature way in which you present. I love, Srini, the twinkle in your eyes when you talk about diversity. And Rajiv, I just like the sage on the stage kind of model. When it comes to you, you have purely wisdom personified. So thank you very much. And this has been a special 1 hour spent in your presence. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me this chance to serve this panel today. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Anil sir, and all the panelists. Suddenly, I am feeling very rich with all the human touch I received from all of you. And just to end the conversation, can I hand over this panelist to Mr. Anil Gaur, who is the Group Chief People Officer at the Uniparts Group, to give his vote of thanks speech. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Leena. What a majestic and splendid session, and all these learned speakers, they brought a different and very relevant perspective on the table. It's my duty to very quickly sum up in next 2 minutes and convey my thanks. So, but before I come to what has been talked about, I think this pandemic situation has brought depression, anxiety, frustration, stress, civil and political unrest across the globe, and it gave a feeling last about 1 year as if the world is faltering and economics are unwinding, jobs are disappearing, and all our spirit is being tested during this period. And therefore, I think it is imperative for all the leaders, or rather every one of us, to demonstrate a compassion in whatever we do. Mr. Sachdeva talked about a quote of Dalai Lama, and I also remember a quote coming from Dalai Lama, and it says that the love and compassion are necessities and not the luxuries, and without them, humanity cannot survive. There is another quote coming from Albert Schweitzer, who was a doctor, philosopher, and Nobel Prize winner. And he also said, the purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others. And I think that is coming from all the speakers. So when I was listening to Linda, she talked about neuro leadership practices, humanity and humility, that is healing pain and suffering of people, wherein humanizing means your approach and how you can make humility and compassion part of DNA. And I also like what she said, that leaders should have a genuine interest to contribute in people's happiness and well-being. Mr. Dubey talked about positive trust to make stakeholders rise, and that is a wonderful idea I got. And I also like what he said, that distributed leadership, an ability to take risks and fail to unleash the full potential of the people. Mr. Sudesh talked about inclusive approach on connecting and caring with the stakeholders and not limiting to employees, and how to bring happiness for them. And when I looked at Mr. Srini, I think his statement, especially how his organization is working towards whole person engagement, which is much beyond workplace engagement and total happiness, and shared. He also shared insight about the people practices and culture coming from his own experience. I must admire, and I really felt touched the way Mr. Anil Sachdeva. He's also veteran, and sir, during my Maruti days, I also got an opportunity to learn from you. And the way you have expressed your feelings without talking anything, with a great humility, and when you said that very loud and clear, what is compassionate leadership, and that is connecting with people. And you also talked about mindfulness. Thanks, just giving that insight. uh, Yesterday when I attended the inaugural session, it was a very powerful session, and I also liked one statement made by Mr. Singhania, and who talked about that how the organization have evolved in last about 1 year after pandemic, and from surviving to reviving and then thriving. And I think it is relevant for all of us to understand how to prepare ourselves for future, and how we can bring perspective of touching the heart of the people. And generally, I whenever I get an opportunity to talk in different forums, what I believe, and I talk to, then perhaps there is a need of redefining the meaning of HRD, human resource development, to HHRD. That means building heart to heart relationship or heart to heart development to rebuild the organization. So, friends and ladies and gentlemen, the crux of the entire discussion and my takeaway from all the speakers in today's session is that there is a need for all the leaders, including the HR leader, to revisit, rethink, redesign our strategies, to re-architect our organization, wherein compassionate leadership is going to be the big differentiator. With this, on behalf of the National HRD Network, Delhi and NCR chapter, and on my personal behalf, I express my sincere gratitude and big thanks to all our speakers in this session, Mr. Dubey, Mr. Sudesh, Mr. Shinini, our moderator, Mr. Anil Sachdeva, and especially Linda, who is connected from Dubai. There were two other concurrent sessions at the same time on developing and sustaining agile practices through turbulence time, wherein Dr. Arvind Agrawal, Roshni Wadhwa, Roswan, Sanjay Muthul, and Smita Saha, they spoke, and the session went very well. I must convey my thanks on behalf of NHRDN chapter, Delhi and NCR chapter, to all those speakers in the session 2, and the session 3 was on building resilience, individual, team, and organization, where Mr. Ranjan Mahapatra, panelists Dr. Alka Mittal, Kripa Krishnamurthy, Shraddhanjali, Abhay Kapoor, my friend, they participated as a speaker, as a panelist. So once again, thanks to everyone, all the speakers, thanks to all the audience, to very patiently spending time and listening to all the eminent speakers. Please enjoy the rest of the day, all other session. Thank you. Goodbye.
And just the last, reimagining capitalism in a world on fire. Reimagining capitalism, our friend Rebecca Henderson's work. Those who are readers, invest in yourself, get this book, Reimagining Capitalism. It will change your life, I can promise you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.